In the 1960s, Opel was known for being a pretty dull car manufacturer, even compared to other German firms. But in 1965, they broke the mold on a concept they hoped would change that perception. A lightweight sports car with a sleek, curvy design. A concept car that evolved into a 5-year production run of what many drivers would affectionately call the baby Corvette. This car was none other than the Opel GT. Now, Opel back in the 60s was best known for practicality. That was like their thing. Its cars, from the compact Opel Kadett all the way to its luxurious Diplomat, were actually pretty good cars. They were popular in Europe, but they didn't draw a huge crowd in America. GM was hesitant to even put its name on the brand. However, in the mid-60s, Opel changed its tune. They put together a design team headed by Claire McKitchen to create something that, while not quite a halo car, would at least give Opel some real sports car chops. McKitchen chose Erhard Schnell to head the design efforts, and they corresponded frequently with Bill Mitchell across the Atlantic, as they put together a new design that was partially inspired by the Mako Shark 2 concept car. Instead of the boring practical lines and squared off shapes that mimicked the rest of Opel's lineup, this new concept, which they called the GT, was curvy. It had a low, Spartan front fascia with a narrow chrome bumper and little else. It had peaked side fenders and a slippery fastback profile, with rectangular pop-up headlights and a small, sporty cabin. They completed the prototype Opel GT in 1965 and showed it in Paris and Frankfurt, with the unique GT body over a Kadett frame with a Record engine. Critics and drivers loved it, and it looked like Opel might have finally found something to compete in the recent sports car boom. And if it was successful, it might even lead to more opportunities for the Opel brand. Now, before we dive in, it's important to understand that the Opel GT would have never really stood a chance in a fight against a big block Corvette, nor would it have with a tank for that matter. But if armored combat is more your speed, then War Thunder has you covered. War Thunder is a top free-to-play military online action game where tanks, planes, and naval vessels all converge together in real-life battlefields at a scale that is genuinely hard to imagine. The game's roster of vehicles spans nearly a century of hardware, from World War II icons like the Sherman and the Tiger tank, all the way up to modern combat vehicles like the renowned M1 Abrams. And every vehicle is modeled and detailed exactly like it would be in real life, with proper armor physics and all the visual details you could expect. Heck, the list of vehicles in War Thunder is so expansive that even some historians may be perplexed by some of the vehicles in here. That's just the sheer scale of how many different playable vehicles there are inside of War Thunder. The graphics, the physics, and the sounds all get updated regularly too, and it shows it. The game looks and feels great, especially because this is not just standard point-and-click arcade combat. All the advanced military tech that you would come to expect is in it, from guided missiles to active protection systems to night vision to even tactical nuclear devices. These are all inside of War Thunder. There are no arcade-style health models either. The damage model is as realistic as it can be. If you shoot a tank in the track, that disables the tank from moving. If you hit the fuel tank on a plane, the plane will then burst into flames, and all of your shots will be cataloged in a super cool X-ray feature where you can see the exact scale of the damage that your round has done to that vehicle. Whether it be a tank, an armored personnel carrier, or a plane, War Thunder lets you engage in large-scale combat the way you want to. And every battle feels fresh because you'll always be paired against new players who have their own diverse set of tanks and military vehicles that they choose from. And this isn't just ground warfare either. Even if you queue up a game in a tank, you'll still be exposed to enemy air support in the battlefield, which means you'll always have to keep your head on a swivel. In War Thunder, as you play, you'll unlock new things, and you can actually customize and modify your vehicles to fit your unique playstyle. And now is a great time to start playing because they just released a new update for the game called Ninth Wave. This update brings with it a new batch of Hungarian airplanes, improved water graphics, and 2 new headline fighters, the American F-16 Block 52 and the Soviet MiG-29M. You can download War Thunder for free on PC, Xbox, or PlayStation by using the link in the description below. New players or players who have not played in the last 6 months can use this link to download it and receive in-game perks, like 100,000 Silver Lions, a special Eagle of Valor decorator, and more. War Thunder Mobile is also available on iOS and Android if playing on the go is more your speed, and a link to download that is also in the description below. War Thunder is a great game. I actually do play it myself too outside of the sponsorship when I have time. It's a lot of fun to take these historic military vehicles out into the world and battle them together. So I highly recommend it. Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and now back to the Opel GT. The problem was that for some odd reason, Opel chose to deny that the GT prototype was anything more than a one-off for a couple years. In fact, it wasn't until 1968 that the production of the Opel GT began, with the first few hundred built at a snail's pace by hand. It was a massive loss of initiative. Had the GT come out in 1966, it would have faced less competition and looked even better to what was available at the time. For example, the classic Ford Capri was first introduced for the 1969 model year. Even a single year more could have given the Opel GT a massive chance to gain a lead in the marketplace. When the production version of the GT finally released, there were two significant changes to its design compared to the prototype. First, and most interesting, the rectangular pop-up headlights were replaced by these eye-catching circular headlights that rotated into position whenever you pulled a lever inside the car. Words simply can't do justice to just how unique these things were. When they were stowed away, the aggressive curves of the hood were perfectly uninterrupted, but when they were deployed, the impression was more of a Porsche 928 than a Corvette. The bodies of these cars were built in France by a company called Brissonneau and Lotz, which mostly built train cars and wagons, but had occasionally worked on cars starting in the 1950s. The second major change that the production GTs had was the front grille got two nostril-like intakes that the prototype did not have. Altogether, these two changes gave the Opel GT's design a bit more distance from the Corvette while still keeping things simple and clean. Another unique aspect of the Opel GT is where the idea of simple and clean probably went a little too far. You see, unlike most fastbacks, the Opel GT had no way to access the rear storage area from behind the car. There was no hatchback and no trunk lid. Instead, you had to pass any luggage through the regular doors of the car and over the seats. On the plus side though, because of this, there was nothing to mess with the GT's attractive lines. On the minus side though, it was a strange departure from the practicality of other offerings by Opel. It was very different than what Opel buyers were traditionally used to. The Opel GT was initially offered with two different engines. The first was a 1.1 liter overhead valve inline-4 that made a rather pathetic 67 horsepower and a little over 60 foot-pounds of torque. That engine was discontinued after a couple years, and almost everybody said good riddance when it was gone. The other engine was only a $100 upgrade, and that one was the 1.9 liter overhead cam inline-4 that made 102 horsepower at 5,400 RPM and 110 foot-pounds of torque at 2,500 RPM. That engine was over square with a 93mm bore and right around a 70mm stroke. It was much more popular than the little 1.1 liter motor for obvious reasons. It's also worth mentioning that the 1.9 liter was a little more powerful in cars manufactured for the European market due to differences in emissions regulations. The Euro-tuned 1.9s made closer to 120 horsepower. Still, nothing to necessarily write home about, but it was faster than its American cousin. Later on, American emissions regulations had began to tighten more, leading to a compression drop with power falling to only 83 horsepower with the 1.9, which was one of the things that would hurt the GT in the long run. Design-wise, even though the Opel GT did look like a baby Corvette, it was much closer to other lightweight European roadsters than Corvettes in performance. In 1973, Road & Track compared it with the Fiat 124 Spider, the MGB, the Triumph GT6, and the Triumph Spitfire. The Opel GT had a curb weight of just around 2,000 pounds, so while its engine was pretty lethargic by late 60s American standards, it wasn't terribly slow because of that low curb weight. The early Opel GT with the 102 horsepower 1.9 in America could do 0 to 60 in just under 10 seconds. Not a rocket ship, but it was lightweight and tossable, especially when compared to a Corvette, which weighed about 1,500 pounds more than the Opel GT. So while it looked like a Corvette, it drove much more like a British sports car. The standard transmission in the Opel GT was a 4-speed manual, but there was a decent 3-speed automatic available for the 1.9 cars if you wanted it. The rear axle was a live axle setup with a standard 344-to-1 rear gear set. The suspension was adequate, but nothing special. It had A-frames and a transverse leaf spring in front with coil springs in the rear. One unique problem with the Opel GT was that many of the options that made it competitive and interesting just weren't that well known to American buyers. For instance, the live axle in the rear had a tendency to lift on uneven surfaces. There was an option for a rear anti-sway bar that mostly fixed the problem, and a limited slip diff was also available. With those options, Motorsport magazine said the Opel GT handled with the precision of a Lotus. That's high praise. However, GTs without these options were quite a bit more unruly, and that didn't help their reputation. Another problem with the Opel GT was that it used effectively tires that were a 165. These were just way too narrow for hard cornering. Opel GTs had a lot of understeer problems just from a lack of mechanical grip, something that could be easily fixed today, but back then it was what it was. The power front disc brakes and rear drums were up around the top of their class. In a road test by Road and Track in 1973, only the Porsche 914 beat the Opel GT in braking distance. The interior itself was functional and comfortable, at least for the driver and passenger in front. The numerous gauges were easy to read, and the side gauges were angled towards the driver. The large center console was dominated by the shifter and control lever for the pop-up headlights. When you actually laid the cards out, this car really wasn't that practical, so most buyers had to be willing to overlook these shortcomings, and the styling was the most compelling reason to do so. The Opel GT ended up being a decent sales success. Sold out of Buick showrooms, about 70,000 Americans bought one, and total worldwide sales were greater than 100,000 cars from 68 to 73. It was the least expensive German sports car that you could buy at the time, with prices starting around $3,500 with the 1.9-liter engine. There was an even less expensive version called the GTJ, J standing for Junior, which appeared in 71, but that only sold about 11,000 cars until 1973. Sadly though, the Opel GT just couldn't keep up to the changing market of the 70s. Not only was it failing to innovate with its power plant, it was losing more and more power to these emissions requirements every year, and more competition came into the game. Cars like the 240Z burst onto the scene and made the Opel GT obsolete overnight. With the Datsun, you could get a lot more sports car and a lot more practicality with great looks for the same money. Buyers began to migrate away. GM and Opel killed the GT at the end of the 1973 model year. The Opel Manta, which was a different car, started production in 1970, and that would remain as the only hint that Opel built anything that would interest enthusiasts. Still, the Opel GT built up a strong following. Over the next few decades, GM would try to revive the Opel GT name. The first attempt was in 2007 when they rebadged the Pontiac Solstice into the Opel GT. That would run through 2010, when GM killed Pontiac and Saturn. In 2016, another Opel GT concept appeared, designed by Mark Adams and powered by a bizarre 1-liter inline-3 motor. That concept, however, would never reach production, and Peugeot bought the Opel name soon afterwards, bringing the prospect of an all-new Opel GT largely to an end again. Nowadays, prices for Opel GTs span a wide range, from serious project cars in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, all the way up to well-maintained drivers and show cars that are 10-20 grand or so. If you'd like to own one of these little pieces of history, you can do so relatively easily, as long as you're willing to put in a little elbow grease. If you want a vintage sports car that's not as expensive as a Porsche, but a little bit more unique than a Triumph or an MG, the Opel GT might just be up your alley. And that is the story of the Opel GT. Thank you guys all for watching this video. If you do have any Opel GT stories, please go ahead and share them down below in the comments. I love reading these stories about the cars we cover. Otherwise, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel because we got new videos like this coming out every week. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one, enthusiasts.